I'm wondering if you know, are there specific American oil companies that are taking advantage of this opportunity in Iraq?
وخصوصا انكم تعلمون ان هنالك طروحات حول موضوع خصخصة القطاعات الصناعية والنفطية في العراق.
There is a talk in Iraq that is revolving around the idea of a privatization of industry and the oil sector.
ونحن نعلن أننا سنقف بوجه هذا الشيء الذي يحصل.
And we declare here today that we're going to oppose this happening in Iraq.
Solidarity forever, for the Union makes us strong.
A lot has been said about the Iraqi puppet government's attack on Basra. It was supposed to show how the Maliki government and his military could stand on their own. When the attack bogged down on the outskirts of town, the U.S. spent quite a bit of effort distancing themselves from the campaign, sort of like a pit bull owner trying to pretend it's the dog's fault when something goes wrong. The first thing I'd like to point out by way of media criticism is the amazing disconnect between the stories in much of the American media, especially on TV news programs, and what was happening on the ground. We were bombarded by television spincasters reporting how the Maliki government was issuing ultimatums to the Basra militia to turn in their weapons or face the wrath of the puppet military. But this photo, published in the Seattle Times, tells a different story. I had heard the TV news and at first glance thought this photo was of the militia obeying Maliki's command to surrender. When I read the caption under the photo, I was surprised to see it's a photo of 40 puppet government soldiers surrendering their weapons to the local militia, a complete opposite story to this spin on TV. As print media started telling the story of how the government forces faltered, TV news just went on to the next topic. Viewers who rely on American TV for their news would probably think the government forces won the battle for Basra. When the smoke cleared, over 1,000 Maliki government troops had deserted and gone to the side of the local militia. You sure didn't hear that on Fox News. And while the bombs were dropping on citizens across southern Iraq, various American politicians weighed in on Basra, mostly to blow smoke, and as usual, to cover up the true story.
يقوم صندوق النقد الدولي بتسليف العراق.
The International Monetary Fund is active in Iraq.
464 مليون دولار.
$465 million.
لكن لم يوافق الصندوق على تسليف العراق هذا المبلغ إلا بشروط.
This organization didn't give the money to Iraq except with certain conditions.
إحدى هذه الشروط هي فرض الضرائب على رواتب الموظفين.
Some of these conditions is imposing taxes on the employees' wages.
وبالإمكان جميع الأخوة نحن نتساءل
We ask today
لماذا يسلف العراق
why Iraq is being loaned
والعراق غني
and Iraq is very rich and wealthy.
من الممكن أن يعطى هذا المبلغ إلى أحد الدول الفقيرة في أفريقيا وغيرها.
It's possible for these loans to be given to poor countries in Africa or somewhere else.
لكننا نعتقد أن السياسة واضحة.
But we think the policy is very clear.
هي كيفية إثقال العراق بالديون.
Is how to put Iraq into a debted country.
حتى يتم تطبيق المرحلة الثانية من الاحتلال.
So that they could fulfill the second stage of occupation.
والمرحلة الثانية وكما تعلمون هي كيفية خصخصة القطاعات الصناعية والنفطية.
And as you know, the second stage is going to be the privatization of all facilities in the country.
وكلكم على اطلاع بهذا المشروع الخبيث.
And you are all aware of this issue.
ونحن في العراق متتبعين لموضوع خصخصة القطاعات النفطية وإعطاء استثمارات كبيرة للشركات العملاقة.
And we are aware of this privatization in this oil sector by not allowing these multinational corporations to have a total control of oil production.
The attack on Basra is part of the effort to secure Iraq's oil for the big multinational oil companies. It's part of the effort to privatize Iraq's national heritage. It's an attack on Iraqi unions, especially the Oil Workers Union and the Dock Workers Union. The attack on Basra is an attack on organized labor.
Your brothers of oil workers,
نقابتهم قديمة جدا في العراق.
their union is very, very old.
فقد تأسست عام 1942.
It was established in 1942.
وقادت أكبر إضرابين في العراق.
And it led the largest, biggest strikes in Iraq.
الأول عام 1946.
The first one was in 1946.
والثاني عام 1952.
And the second one in 1952.
أيام الاحتلال البريطاني للعراق.
During the British occupation to Iraq.
واستطاعت أن تحد من نشاطات الشركات الاحتكارية.
And it was able to control the monopoly, the outside monopoly of foreign companies.
فنحن أبناء أولئك الرجال الذين عملوا في تلك النقابة.
We are the sons of those men that they fought and worked in those unions.
ونريد أن نعيد أمجادهم.
And we wanted to bring back their glory.
فقد استطعنا طرد شركة KBR.
So we were able to chase away KBR company
في عام 2003.
in 2003.
هؤلاء عمال الموانئ.
Those are the oil workers.
وأنقل لكم تحيات إخوانكم عمال الموانئ.
And I wanted to pass to you the port workers also their greetings.
الذين استطاعوا بالتعاون معنا.
Who were able with our solidarity and support.
وبقية نقابات البصرة.
And with the rest of the unions of Basra.
بأن يطردوا شركة ميرسك من ميناء قصر.
To be able to chase away the company called Mersik from the port of Qasr.
The biggest oil company in Iraq is the Southern Oil Company, which is based in the south. And the whole of the south actually has some of the biggest oil installations, and it's also where the untapped, unexplored oil resources of Iraq are thought to lie. And I worked closely with the Southern Oil Company trade union, which I was attracted to not only because I'd heard that there'd been strikes in the oil sector, and I felt that these workers were the most vulnerable and at-risk workers in Iraq, but also the most powerful and the most capable of challenging the occupation. And they proved that they were willing to do that. Southern Oil Company workers threw out Kellogg Brown and Root employees from the very first days of the occupation. They declared their workplaces no-go areas for Kellogg Brown and Root. KBR responded by withholding essential building materials and supplies that were needed to do reconstruction. So the union responded by buying materials with their own money from the black market, from the local market. They're amongst the most capable workers in Iraq. Because they had to maintain their industry through 13 years of genocidal sanctions, and this turned them into creative, inventive geniuses, really. I mean, it was astonishing the way they managed to keep their workplaces going. And workers I met at North Rumaila were saying how, they started working on this sort of pumping station within that particular location, and they realized that it was a big job and they needed somewhere to sleep, and they were going to have to stick around in that area. So they built themselves like a whole new sort of center, not a center, but like a kind of a building. And they were these are the same workers that reconstructed their workplaces after 1991 as well, so they have a lot of experience. And Iraq also has a history of being a center of learning and culture, and has the best engineers in the Middle East. I think Baghdad University has the best engineering department in the Middle East. So the workers have the capabilities. In the very beginning, they expelled their Ba'athist managers. These people were kicked out, and they've organized against those people, and they continue to have a lot of trouble, mostly in Basra, but also in Amara and Nasiriyah. It's worth noting as well that the Southern Oil Company trade union has grown. When I was there, it was sizable, and had managed to win a lot of gains, had transportation, had a very simple, small office on the grounds of the SOC. but were doing well. And one of the secrets, or one of the reasons that they do so well is because they remain politically independent. There's Communist Party people in that union, there's Dawa Party people in that union, but they leave their politics at the door. When they're working as a union, they're working for the interests of the workers, and that's their policy. So as a result, they've stayed out of the IFTU, they've stayed out of the Federation of Workers' Council unions in Iraq, they've stayed independent, but they have working coordination relationships with all the trade unions present in Basra.
In late February, The Guardian of London and other UK media carried stories entitled, "Oil Giants Are Poised to Move into Basra." It turns out that the US and the Brits created some phony Basra Development Commission and appointed this guy, Michael Waring, who is the chief executive of a big multinational corporation, to be the commissioner, all with the blessings of the Maliki government. Oh, those oil companies can hardly wait to get their hands on the Iraqi people's oil. It's not good enough from their point of view to buy Iraqi oil on the open market, fair and square. Big oil companies want to control it. Big oil wants to be the sellers, not the buyers of Iraqi oil. They want the profits to go not to the Iraqi people, but to themselves, and they don't really care who they have to kill to get their way. The problem, of course, is the Iraqi people. Their oil is their birthright, and whatever else divides them, they are pretty much united on the idea that they don't want to give it up to some outsiders and occupiers. The Oil Workers Union has been fighting against privatization of Iraqi oil all along, and with significant success. Meanwhile, Iraqi longshoremen have fought against privatizing the ports. These are union struggles, and these unions and the workers they represent stand in the way of the multinationals' plans.
أعلن الإضراب وتم إصدار مذكرة اعتقال ب10 نقابيين كنت التسلسل رقم 2 فيهم.
So they announced the protest, and there was they were put in jail. 10 of them were put in jail. He was one of them.
ولكن في يوم الاثنين الماضي كنت في بيركلي فاستلمت رسالة من رئيس الاتحاد بنجاح الإضراب وموافقة الحكومة على المطالب. فحقيقة دكتورة صفقت كثيرا في السيارة يعني فرح.
He was in Berkeley last week, and he have heard that the protest was successful, and they managed in the end to get their demands, and he was very pleased to hear this.
Now, you mentioned that one of the key issues in the strike was the hydrocarbon law. Did you get any kind of sense from the government then that they're going to withdraw this law or change it? I mean, obviously that was the big part of the strike, and since you say that the strike was successful, I'm wondering what the outcome is in regards to the law.
هل خالجك شعور إنه الإضراب راح ينجح في تحقيق مطالبه؟
أنا لدينا أصدقاء وطنيين في البرلمان.
We have good patriotic friends in the parliament, so we know that we are backed up with those good patriotic friends in the parliament.
أول نجاح حققنا هو أن استطعنا أن نؤجل دراسة المشروع في البرلمان حتى أكتوبر القادم.
The first success, we managed to postpone second study of this promotion till next October.
ومو أأمل وإنما متفائل جدا أن ننتصر إن شاء الله.
I'm very optimistic. I'm not just hoping. I'm very optimistic that we will get our rights.
In mid-March, the New York Times published an article predicting the violence that the U.S. generals later testified to Congress in April had taken them by surprise. That article in March pointed out that the ports in Basra are Iraq's only major gateway to the Persian Gulf, but that the port is, quote, beset by labor problems and in serious need of dredging and modernization. The article complained that the dock workers refused to work more than 8 hours a day. In the U.S., the bosses used to say, anybody asking for 10 cents when I'm offering a nickel is a communist. In Iraq, first they said union workers were Saddam supporters. Now they claim that union workers are militia-dominated and have to go. Union leaders were supposed to be arrested by government troops a while back, but the general charged with doing the arresting refused to do it.
Now, you mentioned that there were people arrested. I know that there was a arrest sent out by the Maliki's office for most of the leaders of the union, and I guess one of the generals that was given the orders to carry out those arrests actually refused to carry out those arrests. My understanding is that he refused the orders and said that he would not carry those out. Is that correct?
was not clear for me.
When the orders went out from Maliki's office to arrest union leaders, there was a general who was supposed to be the one that carried out those orders to carry out the rest. My understanding is that he said that he would not carry out those orders, and that if they forced him to, he would actually leave the government and join the union.
عندما صدرت مذكرة الاعتقال هو بيعرف إن في واحد من الجنرالات كان ضد مذكرة الاعتقال وكان مهدد إنه يقبض عليه. إيش رأيك في الموضوع؟
هو هذا الشخص هو قائد الجيش العراقي في مدينة البصرة.
This man is the commander of Iraqi army in Basra town.
وتصرف بشجاعة حقيقة وقال لا أعتقل أشخاصا يحبون العراق نصا يعني.
And he was very courageous, and he said literally that I don't take to jail people who love Iraq.
ووفر الحماية للعمال المضربين.
And he provided the needed protection for the workers.
So now the puppet Maliki government, supposedly slipping off the U.S. leash, has launched a Fallujah-style assault on Basra, backed up by U.S. troops and massive air support. The stakes in this latest horror show are the same ones since the war began: oil, and specifically organized labor, which is standing between the multinational oil junkies and their fix. Meanwhile, Iraqi unionists struggle on for the same sorts of things workers the world over fight for.
لا يزال العمال العراقيين لا يتمتعون بقانون عمل عصري يحدد أجورهم وخدماتهم.
The Iraqi workers do not have an law that can protect their wages, protect their interests, or protect their organized unions.
ولا ضمانات صحية.
There is no health security for them.
قد جرى بعض الشيء في تحسين رواتب الموظفين لكن هو ليس بالمستوى المطلوب.
There was a little improvement in the wages of employees, but if you look at it, it is not sufficient enough.
What kind of oppression have the workers faced under the occupying forces?
أول هذه الإجحافات وأهمها عدم وجود قانون عمل يحمي العمال.
One of the major things is not having a law to protect the rights of workers.
لأن العمال العراقيين حجب عنهم قانون العمل منذ عام 1987.
Because the Iraqi people were deprived of a law to protect them since 1987.
كذلك عدم حصولهم على كثير من حقوقهم المشروعة كالضمان الاجتماعي والضمان الصحي والتقاعد الجيد.
And for being deprived also of their rights to have a medical insurance, retirement plan, or even wages.
Privatization has become a modern plague as fights rage around the world against the corporate takeover of water, forests, and other resources, public utilities, and even schools and prisons. The Iraqi unions are on the same side of this fight as Californians concerned about the privatization of their electrical systems. The Iraqi unions are on the same side of this fight as communities fighting against the privatization of drinking water. Iraqi unions deserve our support. And those who would challenge American political candidates might want to consider asking a question that really matters, the one they are all avoiding because it cuts right to the oily heart of the matter. If you are all about building democracy in Iraq, do you support Iraqi labor unions or not?
Anti-war activists here in the U.S. look to the labor movement in Iraq as a place that can overcome the sectarian divisions that we see tearing Iraq apart right now. Because the workers' movement obviously is for all working people, regardless of which religious background or which ethnic background they have. In your union in particular, is there a diversity of different groups within your union? Is that an important part of your work, is to bring Iraqi working people together?
هل في داخل حركة العمال اختلافات بالنسبة لطوائف واختلافات دينية مختلفة بحيث تكون الحركة ممثلة لشريحة كبيرة من العراقيين؟
هو أولا جميع العراق لا توجد فيه اختلافات لا أثنية ولا عرقية ولا مذهبية ولا شيء من ذلك.
Iraq in general don't have any sectorial, ethnic or political affiliations differences.
وما ينقل هو شيء كذب يعني.
And what has been conveyed is lack truth.
أما النقابات فهي مهنية وبطبعها هي مستقلة. العراق للجميع والدين هو اختيار شخصي.
The unions are independent and Iraq is for all and the religion is private choice.
هذا رأيي.
So that's the story corporate media isn't telling you. The story the candidates carefully avoid in their statements on the situation in Basra. Among the platitudes about how the U.S. occupation of Iraq might end, they all avoid the obvious, which is the role of labor, of non-sectarian organizations like these trade unions. The U.S. is waging a war against the Iraqi people, and the stakes are oil, and we, American workers, have a role to play in ending the bloodshed by acting in solidarity with our union brothers and sisters in Iraq and by forcing a U.S. withdrawal.
And as you know, the consequences of the occupation has negative impacts, many negative impacts on the Iraqi people.
وأنا ومن هذا التجمع الخير أقول للولايات المتحدة الأمريكية اخرجوا من بلادي حالا.
And from this stage, I am saying to the American government, please get out of our land right away.
For Pepper Spray Productions and the Seattle Independent Media Center, I'm Randy Rowland.
I'm Matt Vintos, the Vice President of the ILW, the International Longshore Warehouse Union here in Seattle. We're here right now to show our friends that we're here to stand behind them in their struggles and beside them and to support them in all of their endeavors as they struggle forward from this point on.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the Information Purification Directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of very contradictory thoughts. Unification of thoughts is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
One of the things I particularly appreciated about the press release that Brendan Phillips, who you'll see later, and Sandy McDonald from Seattle Folklore Society, thanks to him, put together was that the Seattle folk community was coming together to celebrate Utah in this next stage, wishing him well in this next stage of his life. And we are definitely part of a folk tradition that takes a look at music and steals it. Want to say something?
So, well, yeah, we're gonna do a relatively newly stolen one, newly written one, that is part of that great wobbly tradition also of taking a song that many people know, although in this case, this would be only many people in the folk community. But at any rate, taking a song that many people know and rewriting the words. So this is part of two grand traditions.
And it's really hot off the presses. Susan wrote these lyrics last week.
Whoa.
Wait till you hear
well, yeah,
it. But
you might want to hear it first.
and it's definitely got a spot for you. You'll figure out where it comes.
If I can see the words. Okay.
All right. Okay.
Come all you bold businessmen, clever and proud, and risk not your fortune to follow the Dow. It's not but a jungle with bull and with bear, and Wall Street's a road leading straight to despair, and the Dow's
down, down, very down. Yes, the
Dows, down, down, very down.
When I worked for the company, my wage was okay. I tightened my belt, tucked some savings away. They said through investing my dollars would grow. I jumped at the chance for a cheap IPO, and the Dows,
Down, down, very down. Yes, the
Dows, down, down, very down. At first it did soar, and to capitalize, my broker advised me to diversify. For my pension I went with the stock option plan. What I bought is worth less now than when I began. And the Dows,
down, down, very down.
yes, the Dows,
Down, down, very down.
There's a market to sell you a steak or some bread, another for gold or for blue chips instead. They'll take all your green and they'll call you a red for asking, but how will the hungry be fed when the Dows,
Down, down, very down.
yes, the
Dows, down, down, very down.
There's your futures,
You're holding
your values,
your share.
it's all mutual
interest.
growth, but beware, you could still be a wage slave. There's no guarantee when you're tied up in bonds and the market is free. And the Dows,
Down, down, very down.
yes, the Dows,
Down, down, very down.
the wealth of the nation is easy to find. Just look at a schoolhouse, a farm, or a mine. But invest all your savings, and what do you get? Another day older and deeper in debt. And the Dows, down, down, very down. Yes, the Dows, down, down, very down.
صندوق النقد الدولي بتسليف العراق.
The International Monetary Fund is active in Iraq.
464 مليون دولار.
$465 million.
لكن لم يوافق الصندوق على تسليف العراق هذا المبلغ إلا بشروط.
This organization didn't give the money to Iraq except with certain conditions.
إحدى هذه الشروط هي فرض الضرائب على رواتب الموظفين.
Some of these conditions is imposing taxes on the employees' wages.
وبالإمكان جميع الأخوة نحن نتساءل
We ask today
لماذا يسلف العراق
why Iraq is being loaned
والعراق غني
and Iraq is very rich and wealthy.
من الممكن أن يعطى هذا المبلغ إلى أحد الدول الفقيرة في أفريقيا وغيرها.
It's possible for these loans to be given